Lists and libraries are the heart of SharePoint. Everything that you do in SharePoint is going to be related to lists and libraries. And some of those lists and libraries are very important for your organization. This may be something tracking key information on customers or sales, things that are important to you that you'd like to keep a close eye on. It makes perfect sense that you might like to have a report emailed to you on a regular basis to tell you about activity on that key library or a key list. In this video, I'm going to show how you can set up an automated report using Power Automate to go ahead and send you an email update to let you know what's taken place in the last week. This email is going to be formatted nicely in a table, and it'll give you a whole listing of that new activity and be linked to those items, as well as provide a link back to the list. So we're ready to begin. Let's get SharePoint smart. Okay, so I've got a couple of things in SharePoint that I want to get reports on. And I've got this list and I've got a library, and I simply want to know this. What are new records that have been added either to this purchase list or to this documents library within the last week? I just want to set up a report on that. And for your case, you can make this happen for any list or library that you want to keep a close eye on. So the output that I'm looking for is going to be an email, and I'll just give you a preview of what we're shooting for. So here's the kind of email we want. We want to just have a listing of all the files that were added to a library. That's this case. I want to have links to those files. I want to know who created the file, when was it created, and then have a link to that library in the email in case I want to go digging for more information. And then similarly, I also want to do the same thing with a list. So in that case, I want to have a list sent out to a table for me and a summary of those new items. So very similar in concept. It's just that in one case we're doing a list, in the other case we're doing a library. Okay, so the next thing that we're going to do is get into Power Automate. Now, for this demonstration, what I'm going to do is go ahead and build the workflow with you. Below the video, I've linked to some code snippets and provided information that you'll need in order to use some functions to get the output that we're looking for. So we're going to go ahead and build a new flow, and you can do this workflow by having the video next to Power Automate, and you can walk through the steps. So go ahead and pick a list or a library to work through, and we're going to go through that. We're going to start with the SharePoint list. Okay, so this is going to be scheduled, so I need to do a new flow, and I'm going to do scheduled cloud flow. Okay, let's go ahead and skip by this screen. We'll go ahead and do the naming and everything. And go ahead and close Copilot, and we're going to get into the regular designer. You can go ahead and disable the new designer mode. Okay, so we want scheduled workflow. And we'll go right to advanced options. And I'm in Eastern time zone, so I'm going to go ahead and pick that. Come down through here. I think it's on the third part of the dropdown. This is going to happen weekly. You can, of course, do whatever settings you want. For our example, we're going to do a weekly report. So I've got my time zone set up, and then it asks me for the date, time, in a specific format. And I'm going to reference back to my workflow that I've already completed. That'll just make my life a little bit easier. So I'll just go ahead and copy and paste that in. And I'm going to go ahead and run this on Sundays only. And it wants to know the hour. This shows all the hours in military time. So 22 means 10 o'clock at night. I just want it to run one time every Sunday at that hour. And then for minutes, that can just be 0. It's going to be right on the hour. And we've got everything set up for the reoccurrence. So this workflow is going to automatically run once a week for me at 10 o'clock on Sunday nights. That's what I want to do. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is get a date reference, which is going to be the date precisely going back 1 week. So I need to deduct 7 days from a date time variable of now. So the way I can do that is with a little bit of a code snippet. And again, I'll provide these linked below the video. I'm going to just copy and paste from my other workflow to speed things up right now. So we need a new step. We're going to do compose. And there it is. And I'm just going to paste in. Make sure that you're in the expression block when you put in this formula. Otherwise, this will not work. What we're telling it is, give me the date timestamp of right now. That's what UTC now is. And subtract 7 days. And then I'm giving it the formatting that's needed for a filter query that I'm going to do. So just like that. Naturally, you can adjust if you want to do a daily report or whatever it is that you want to do. And I like to be very descriptive. So we're going to say compose, and then I'm going to say today minus 7 days. Today minus 7 days. Okay, so we're just getting that ready for our next step. The next thing that we want to do is we're going to get the items from my list. Okay, so this is going to be a new step, and we want to do the get items workflow block. There it is. And then you're going to pick your site address and your list name. So I know my site address is SPDB, and my list name is down below. There it is, purchase. And now I'm going to do some advanced options. So again, I like to be descriptive. I'm going to say get new items in my list. And we need to go in the settings. We want to make sure that it doesn't stop after 100 records. And in order to do that, we're going to go in the advanced settings. And I like to just go with the max number, which is 5,000, turn on pagination, and save. If we don't do that, it would stop after 100 items, and you may have a case where you have more than 100 items. Now, we need to do a filter query here because what we're looking for are only items in my list that were created within the last 7 days. And in order to get that, we're going to need a filter query that looks like this. So it is the created field, and GE stands for greater or equal than, and then I need to provide the argument. So I already have that set up with my compose block, so I can just click on that. It does need to be enclosed in single quotes. Okay, so now the filter query is going to go to the purchase list. It's going to get items relevant to right now when the workflow runs that have happened within the last 7 days. Perfect. Okay, next step, we're going to do something that's interesting that's available to us. We want an HTML table output from our list. This is going to be used for what you saw in the email. So we have a special flow block that we can call on, which is going to execute that for us. So that is to create an HTML table. So I'll do create. Whoops, that's not going to help it very much. Let's do create HTML. There it is, create HTML table. Okay, and then it's going to ask from the output, it's the get new items, which is listed in the top. I'm just going to pick the very first option, which is value list of items. And then I want to go to show advanced options. I don't want automatic column creation. This would be a problem to me. I have a lot of columns in my list. I only want a small handful of them displayed in the email. So I need to change that to custom. And when I do that, it's going to give me paired values for header and value, and I'm going to be able to make selections on my own. And just to speed things up, I'm referring back to my workflow I already created. So I'll just take a look and see what I did before. I want to do name, business, created. And these are just the labels that show in your email at the header of your HTML table. That's all that's for. Now, with the header, it's not letting you do spaces. So that doesn't really bother me too much. I just put an underscore. For the purpose of my email, that's going to be just fine. But just a note, it's not going to let you put spaces in there. And you can just kind of work around that issue. I imagine you could do a dash also as well. Let's see if it takes that. Yes, you could do that, but in any case, you can't do spaces. That's just part of how this create HTML table works. You have to roll with that. Okay, so name's easy. I can just look on my supplied list of values on the side. I can do a search for dynamic content and select name. And same thing is going to be the case for business. Whoops, I put it in the wrong field. There we go. And then we'll do the created by. That's the last easy one. So I can just use dynamic content search. Now I don't want to just pick the first created by. We're looking for the display name. So let's make sure we pick that. Pick created by display name, and that will be the value we want to appear in the email. And now we need created and link. Now with created, we want to do some formatting. If we don't do this, it's going to spit out a long gobbledygook date timestamp that is not user friendly. And we do want to make sure we get something user friendly. So this will be included with the snippets under the video, so you can reference those. We need to have some formatting on this. So I can go to expression, and then this is referring back to the get new items item, which is created. And it's formatting, so it'll just show the date and the time for when that was created. It's getting it into a user-friendly format for us. Okay, we've got another code snippet, again, linked below the video. And this one is going to make a little hyperlink for us in the email. Just to refer you back to the email, this is the last column. And if I just provided the URL for a link to the item, it would be a long chain of characters. It would make the email look really unfriendly. And instead, we just want to have something that just says item link. So I can just click on that. That is the purpose of this next code snippet. All right, so let me copy that. Okay, so this just will say item link. What you're seeing in here is a function that says concat, and that means concatenate, and it means chain together some strings. So if you look closely at this code, what you'll see is some HTML, which is a hyperlink reference. So it's chaining together the characters at the beginning, and then it inserts the link, and then just adds this actual explicit label that says item link, and makes our hyperlink for us. So that's what we're shooting for. Whoops, I put it in the wrong spot. Hold on a second. All right, there's our link. All right, so we got our HTML table all queued up and ready to go. Now, the next thing that's a little tricky, but not too bad once you understand what's going on. When you get specially formatted emails, think about marketing emails. Sometimes you might hear the term email blast. Those have special HTML formatting and CSS that styles the email to make it look nice. If we didn't include any styling in this, we wouldn't have any of the nice formatting on the table. So we wouldn't have borders or backgrounds or control the font or any of those things. And we do want to have a really nice looking email. And luckily, with only a little bit of effort, we can do that. So in our case, what you can see is we've got a grid with black borders. You can see there's a light yellow headline. You can make things look however you want, but we need to have some formatting in order to make our output look nice. So what we need is another compose block, which we'll do right below. So I'll do new step and compose. And I'm going to do this, and I like my labels, so I'm going to rename it and say compose CSS. And then in here, I'm going to paste. And again, you can use my code snippet I'm providing below the video. And this just does some basic things to make that table look nice. It says to collapse the borders in the table. We want a 1 pixel solid black border around the table cells. We want a little bit of padding. And then it tells it to make the header row light yellow background and then a light blue, which is Azure, for the regular table rows. That's all that it tells it to do. And we're going to bake that into our email. So we have to set this up and use it as part of our recipe to make our email look nice. All right. Now we're ready for the payoff. We're ready for the send email block. So I'll go ahead and do another new step. And I'm just going to type send email. And what we're after is send an email v2. And I'm just going to set it to go to me. There we go. And I'll say weekly new customers report. And it will be from me. I just use the advanced options to expand that out a little bit. I don't need to do anything else in there. If you wanted to, you can, make this high importance if you want that email flagged. Now, what we're focused on at this point is the content of the email. By default, it's going to show you this rich text editor. And the rich text editor does some things that can interfere with what we want. And therefore, we need to switch this into code view. That's going to show us the HTML instead. So you want to click on these angle brackets in the upper right corner and switch to that code view for the rest of the formatting. Now you can start out by typing in the rich text editor if you want, but in general it's best to be in the code view. And I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste some of what I had, and I'll make some substitutions and explain what's going on here. All right, so I'm in my code view. I'm going to go ahead and replace that. Now the top block should be where your CSS goes. So that will not be visible. This is formatting instructions for the email, and we want that to be embedded up at the top. So notice where those labels are handy now. I can just click on Compose CSS, and there's my outputs for that. And then you can see some formatting codes in here that produce this email. Here's the weekly customers report, new customers in bold. And then I have another code snippet. This is the last code snippet, and I'll try to explain what's going on here a little bit. So what we want is this create HTML table block referenced. So let me click on here, and I'll go to the expression. Oh, it's being cranky with me. Hold on one second. There it is. I'll see if I can zoom that in a little bit. All right. So I'm just going through the characters, and this will be referenced down below too. Now there's a little bit of a problem that occurs with the hyperlink. So earlier in this code, I built this link to the items, but I have to replace, because what's going to happen is it's going to try to turn these into HTML versions of those characters, and I basically have to reverse it back. So it deals with 3 special characters, the less than symbol, the greater than symbol, and the quotes. It's going to fix all of that for me and surround what I have for the create HTML table. So we need this little snippet in order that our output looks correct. So that's a little bit tricky, but that's what this replace function is all about. It's a nested replace function to get a few of those characters output correctly. Okay, so whoops, it replaced all my code. That's not what I want. Okay, so should be good to go with that. You can just work from the code snippet provided. And then, whoops, I'm over here. I was in my original workflow. I got tangled up there for a second. Okay, that looks good. That's what I want. So I can go ahead and save and test this now. Test early, test often, save early, save often. It's always good to check your progress along the way just to make sure that things are going along correctly and make sure you're going to get what you want. So go ahead and test your flow out. You can select manually, click test, and run your flow. Click done. And that should fire off pretty quickly. And I should immediately get a couple email or one email in my box. We'll go ahead and check that out. And let me just expand that real quick. So there's my email. Notice I've got links to the items. So what it did is it went and queried my list and it found records that were created in this list just within the last week. I have a summary report. It tells me the date and time when those items were created. It says who they were created by. In this case, it was by an automated process. And I've got links off to those items as well. One additional thing I didn't mention, I also explicitly put a link back to the list at the bottom of the email because maybe I see something here. I say, hey, who's that person? I want to go into SharePoint and make an update or get some more information. So that's also handy. In addition to the item links, go ahead and provide a link back to the list itself. So that would be a good practice to go through those steps. So that was pretty good. We got everything to work right on our first pass. The other example, which I'm just going to review in my existing flow, would be for the library. So we just did for a SharePoint list. Now, what about a situation where I want to know about new files that were loaded? And another thing I want to mention, this is dealing with new items added. It is very easy for you to use the same concept for items that were updated. Maybe I need a report of all files or items that were updated. You have to make only one very minor change to what I demonstrated. The part where it says get new items instead of created, that simply becomes modified. I would simply say where modified is greater or equal to 7 days before today. That is the only change I need to make in the workflow. I would, of course, update the content in the email to say, here's the report of items that were updated. But that's the only change. Now let's look at the version for a library. It's nearly identical. There's just a couple minor differences. So instead of the get items flow block, instead what you're going to do is go ahead and do the get file properties. And that's just the library version of get items. So you can click in here and let's see if I can find it. I already have it added in this workflow, and I would say get file. It says get files properties only. That is the equivalent block you will use. It's nearly identical to the get items block. You're going to provide it the site address and then the library instead of the list. Everything else is going to work the same. You're going to do your filter query and filter for the items that are within the last 7 days. And then just as in the last case, you're going to use the create HTML table block, and then you'll reference the relevant columns. Now, the columns that you want for a document library are going to be different. Probably you just want the name of the document, and you should include the file name with extension. That's the option that's going to be useful to you. You want to know who it was created, when it was created, who it was created by, and then as in the last case, you're going to want to have that link. Everything else is going to be identical for a library. So in short, once you know how to do a list, you know how to do a library. You just make a couple slight differences to adapt and adjust to do it for a library. And then notice also in the bottom of the email content for the library, I do the same thing. I say, hey, here's the new items. And then in case you wanted to go to the library, here's the link. And that just lets the user just click right from their email and not have to dig around to find that library. They can just go right there. So that's it. That's everything you need to know to run these nicely formatted email reports. So if you're like me, there are going to be key lists and libraries. There's certain places that are hotspots in SharePoint where there's really important things going on. There are updates that you want to be aware of. There are things that your managers may need to be aware of. And it's not enough to just have the list there. Out of sight, out of mind, as they say. This technique is going to let you have a reminder and make that visible, surface that information directly to an email just so that you can have those really key items, those new items referenced just at a glance when somebody's checking through their emails. It's really handy and it's really repeatable. You could use this on any list or library. So I hope you found that handy. I hope you'll walk through this example by watching the video and also using the snippets provided below the video. And then you can run some nice email reports to let people know about those key updates on lists and libraries. Good luck.